Welcome to the new episode of Green Gardens. I am Aishu Bharadwaj, Assistant Editor at Trade Promotion Council of India. And as we promised, we are bringing new thought leaders each day. And today we have with us another inspiring and yet young entrepreneur, Mr. Santosh Gurunath, co-founder and CEO of Umagine. Welcome to our series, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aishu, for the kind introduction.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
All right, sir. So without taking, much of your time, I would directly ask the very first simple yet important question. What inspired you to establish Umagine, sir?
So I'll also give you a very simple answer for that. I was working in very large corporates before starting Umagine, like oil and gas companies as well as management consulting like Shell and McKinsey's of the world.
Okay.
And those companies, I realized that focus and attention towards climate change and sustainability was very minimal, right? And then the point when we realized that it's going to be so important and we have to go all hands on deck to solve such a crisis. Working in an organization where maybe the focus is not there 100% on that, I thought that's not the right thing to do. Maybe I'll do something on my own where I can affect the change, right? So that's the reason why I started Umagine, to kind of be a change agent or a change maker and inspire everyone else in the space of sustainability and climate change.
All right, sir. So for our audience, could you brief us what Umagine is exactly doing for this energy?
Sure. So Umagine has had a journey for over 4 years doing a number of different things. We started originally in the Netherlands, very close to Amsterdam, where we were an EPC company to begin with in the rooftop solar and electric vehicle charging space. So we did over 100 projects in and around Amsterdam, greenifying, solarizing, as well as installing electric vehicle chargers for a number of B2C clients and some B2B as well. We slowly kind of pivoted ourselves to a hydrogen company. Already in the Netherlands, where we started a little bit on hydrogen mobility. And then somehow in 2021, we moved our bases to India, looking at the large scale opportunity which exists in the green hydrogen space in India. And since then, for the past 2 years, we have been completely active in India, focusing primarily or actually 100% on green hydrogen, making us one of the few companies which has 100% of its focus on green hydrogen. So within the hydrogen space itself, we do a number of things. We started our activities a lot on the strategy and policy side. We work with state governments like the government of Gujarat, helping them with the policy, working on the strategy space with a number of small scale as well as medium scale companies who wanted to enter the green hydrogen space, and helping them with the roadmap on that. Slowly moving towards more larger scale projects, integration projects, where we work with developers, helping them with entire business cases and sensitivity studies around large scale green ammonia production for export purposes, as well as a number of pilot projects which are ongoing right now, where we have played an important role either on the system integration front or the engineering front or the bidding stage, right? 4 out of 4 projects which are ongoing right now, we have been involved in one way or the other. So that's a lot on the integration space. So with that, we have first strategy, policy, engineering, design. In addition to that, for the past year or so, we have been focusing on developing our own technology on hydrogen fuel cells, primarily for stationary power generation applications, which can be used to replace diesel gensets, which can be used to, let's say, as an energy storage, long duration energy, or intermittent renewable energy sources. So that is what we have been doing, and more and more with time, we are transitioning ourselves into a technology company, building products around hydrogen fuel cells.
All right, sir. I only wish Umagine all the best, and I only, also wish that it covers more and more domains as it can, to uplift energy industry. So moving on to my next question, what is the most promising technology Umagine is developing to accelerate, the shift towards sustainability, and how does it work, sir?
So we have kind of looked at a number of different areas, right? Given that our exposure to the green hydrogen economy has been quite dense and immense, I would say, at least in India and also globally. From all those different things, we have decided to focus ourselves on hydrogen fuel cells. And I specifically hydrogen fuel cells for two different reasons. One, it solves for, let's say, replacement of diesel related generator sets, right? I mean, that's the true replacement of that is with hydrogen fuel cells, not exactly batteries, because batteries only an carrier, whereas here you replace diesel with hydrogen gensets with fuel cells, right? So the entire problem around pollution from diesel gensets gets solved on one side. The second, which is very important, is the socio-economic aspect as well, right? There's a lot of power shortage, let's say load shedding, or in fact no power at all in several regions of country even now. At least India and Africa, it's even worse. So coming up with a technology where which can solve for the energy access problem as well. That is something which we thought, combining the sustainability with energy access to the last mile is something which we looked at. So that is the technology which we are working on, hydrogen fuel cells for stationary power applications, and within that, of course, falls a wide range of application sets, right, from small scale, say, residential to medium scale microgrids to large scale data centers to very large scale grid level applications, right, from grid storage to ancillary services. So there's a very wide kind of application set, and we are looking to kind of develop application specific technology, right? I mean, currently a lot of technologies are out there, but then they are very, I would say, generic. But we are looking to kind of come up with products which are application specific, solving, a data center will have completely different problems than, let's say, industry which needs a 4-hour or a 6-hour per day backup, right? And similarly, ancillary services for a renewable energy asset will have completely different set of solutions, space required. So we are looking at developing those application specific kind of solutions. At the same time, looking at indigenization of the components, right? I mean, at this point of time, it's a challenge. So we are looking to leverage, let's say, the progress which some of the other countries, both in Asia and Europe and US have made to get ourselves started rather than, reinventing the wheel. But there's a clear roadmap towards indigenization so that we can develop, I would say, 80-90% of these components completely in-house in India so that we are least dependent on other countries for these components and for the scaling up of the same.
Right, sir. And I think this is the reason why our country needs entrepreneurs like you who are, not just developing it for the sake of development, but, to actually solve the energy related problems. And with this, my next question would be, how does Umagine adapt its services to meet the specific needs of industries transitioning to hydrogen like steel, cement, and mobility?
Right. So the industries which you specifically mentioned around steel, cement, and mobility, let's talk about one by one. Right. So steel and cement are the industries which are going to use hydrogen as a feedstock itself. Right. I mean, so there, however, in mobility, there are two aspects. Well, of course, hydrogen is going to be used for mobility applications, but there's also technology aspects around it. Fuel cells or hydrogen internal combustion engine. Similarly, steel and cement, there's going to be a technology element where you need to develop hydrogen-based direct reduction ion technologies, as well as burners which can operate 100% on hydrogen in your cement industry. So let's say our products specifically on the hydrogen fuel cell side for stationary power do not let's say overlap with any of these applications very specifically. However, there we have kind of supported a number of these industries in the past is through our advisory services, right? So that is an area where we have worked with, let's say, to develop roadmaps for these kind of industries. But on the technology front, I would say our focus is more on the stationary power generation side rather than using hydrogen for steel or cement or specifically, mobility-based fuel cells, which is again different from fuel cells for stationary applications.
Right, sir. All right. So, could you explain how Umagine covers the entire low carbon hydrogen value chain and its role in decarbonizing industries?
Sure, absolutely. So, as I said, right, I mean, our services kind of the products and services which Umagine offers is covered over an entire over the entire value chain, right? I mean, we start very much from the strategy, and I would say even at strategy and the policy level, right? And that's where, given using our deep understanding of the market, deep understanding of the supply side, demand side, how technology maturation could take place, as well as understanding what is the best technology from a decarbonization perspective, right? Hydrogen is, I mean, we should not be deploying hydrogen for the sake of deploying hydrogen. It should make sense, right? And that making sense is a very subjective and a difficult question, right? I mean, that let's say whether an application makes sense in Germany may not make sense in India, and the other way around, right? And so there is going to be a lot of understanding and know-how, which is, I would say, geography specific, which is important, right? Because if you look at a lot of text and a lot of documents and reports are based out of European or American based studies, right? Which you cannot one-on-one translate. So from the strategy and the policy side, specifically, we work with state governments, right? I mean, where in the end, let's say the last mile or the small to medium scale decentralized hydrogen has to be installed. I mean, I'm not talking about mega scale as yet. So helping them from building that use case, empowering them to make those right calls, right, on doing the right thing, also from a decarbonization perspective. So that's like one. The second thing is, a lot of, as you already mentioned, right, a lot of these industries hearing the policy, let's say, incentives around hydrogen, want to enter into hydrogen, right? And then we do help them in a different way, right? I mean, both via a lot of open source, let's say, articles which we write, white papers we write, as well as advisory services, where we basically we have discussions where we directly tell them, what, hydrogen is not for you right now. It doesn't make a business case, for example. It doesn't make sense. But then if they want to do it for a longer term, then what could be their roadmap, right? I mean, give them fact-based, science-based assessment on how it could kind of move on. Right? So that is like on one side at I would say 30,000 feet level view or a 10,000 feet level view. The second part is coming very much from a engineering side, right? Design, optimization, engineering. So there, again, a lot of aspects around, let's say, designing a large-scale green hydrogen plant are complex. I mean, not a lot have been made. You're talking about temporal matching. It should be always green. It should not use the grid. So there's a lot of optimization that could be done on what is the right mix of renewable energy, energy storage, size of the electrolyzer. So we do have our internal tools and models which can very well, estimate what is the right mix, right? So that is something which we provide services with to large-scale developers as well as medium-scale, project developers. Moving on to the engineering aspect, right? So, for example, let's say that tenders are being built, tenders are being won, but these projects are coming up for the first time. Now we do have, let's say, understanding and expertise on hydrogen itself, dealing with hydrogen equipment. So we are able to come up with best practices on that front to ensure that we make the project which is inherently safe in design, with the right set of standards, as well as not very expensive, right? So more on the engineering side, how we can contribute. So I would say that's like those are the 3-4 aspects more on the non-hydrogen fuel cell side, and of course on the hydrogen fuel cell side, as I said, range of applications, right from material handling equipment, right? For example, forklifts and warehouses, to telecom services, telecom towers which use diesel gensets, to data centers, backup. I mean, there's a whole plethora of applications where hydrogen fuel cells would come into play. So it's both a combination of, I would say, advisory, engineering, and technology services to actual product which we are rolling out on the ground.
That's I mean, it's great to hear, sir, that Umagine is doing so much, and again, wishing all the best to achieve your goals and your visions. So moving on to my next question, and yet an important question. Can you discuss the challenges faced by your company in green and blue hydrogen production?
So I would expand that a little bit in terms of challenges.
Sure.
See, the thing is that at this point of time, hydrogen, to make business case out of hydrogen is very challenging, right? I mean, expensive, comparative natural gas or diesel is cheaper, the capex is high. So there are a number of aspects which makes it very, very difficult to actually, I mean, very simply put, make money out of it, right? So what you are looking at globally is either countries like US and Europe which support a lot of these companies starting up early stage companies with grants, right, with funds,
Right.
which they can very easily kind of move on. Then there are these large scale companies, both in India as well as abroad, who have dedicated maybe 2%, 5%, or 10% of their capital to run a hydrogen business to see and explore. But then for a company like us, which is as of yet completely bootstrapped, I mean, which would change in the future, it is challenging to survive on our own cash flows. I mean, which we have been doing very successfully, I would say, with some projects. But again, the challenge is more around let's say converting projects, because there are no business cases, and then if there are no business cases, it's very difficult to get paid for the advisory services as well, right? So I think that is like one fundamental challenge at an existential, right? But then when you look at a production level, I mean, of course, there are other challenges when you go into depths of green hydrogen production. I mean, in India, I mean, some of the major challenges are around, how are you going to get your electrolyzer to operate at 80% utilization factor, right? I mean, how are you going to get temporal matching and be minimally dependent on the grid, right? Because the banking, as such, the facilities, there are announcements which are there to allow banking, but most of the states do not have the infrastructure to provide that, right? So that is going to be one of the biggest challenges when it comes to projects. The second thing is, of course, around infrastructure. I mean, there's going to be a supply chain shortage on availability of electrolyzers, and the Indian manufacturers who already started have to scale up very quickly, right? But then it's a chicken and egg. I mean, on when projects would come up, or they need to set the manufacturing facilities first. So a number of challenges on the commercialization aspect of it. But let's say in the end of the day, like if I want to summarize all of that together, I do very strongly feel that at least we in India, and in fact globally as well, we are looking at this as a commercial opportunity rather than an emergency to solve from a climate change perspective. So we have to start shifting our mindset. I mean, unless and until we do that, and unless and until we do that, we cannot really expect this to just happen by itself. I mean, it also means putting a price for that. I mean, absorbing price, accepting lower returns, so many different aspects. I mean, let's say underwriting risk. There are a number of different things which needs to happen, but it needs to happen right now. I mean, we cannot say, fine, we'll wait till 2040 for hydrogen to start, or 2035. It'll already be too late, right? And then most of the time, at that point of time, you wouldn't then spend any money on hydrogen. You'd have to spend most of the money on, let's say, direct air capturing the CO2 which you have emitted, and it's going to be far more expensive. So I think that's the fundamental challenge. Once we change that mindset, or at least accept that there has to be a mindset shift, the rest can follow, I think.
Right, sir. Very well said. And with this, I want to know what is your vision for Umagine's role in shaping the future of sustainable energy in India, and how do you plan to contribute to this transition, the transition which is happening in India right now?
So from our perspective, I think our vision is very clear that we want to come up with technology. We want to use technology as a lever to accelerate the efforts towards energy transition, right? Where we start currently with hydrogen fuel cells, that's where we want to focus on and try to solve for that energy access as well as polluting diesel gensets problem. I mean, that is like one very clear aspect where we start with. But even in the longer term, we think that technology is the way to go, where we can develop indigenous technologies based out of India with minimum dependence, and scale it up as much as we can, right? And not be dependent on external kind of factors. I mean, of course, be dependent on internal kind of synergies, right, among states, among regions, but then not really from the external factors. So I think that's where our vision states that we focus on that, we spend money on that as a country, as a community, as an industry. Then I think we can move very fast, because there is no lack of talent here. There is no lack of anything here. In fact, I mean, it is just a matter of pure will and taking that action.
Right. So as you have earlier talked about the challenges which you have faced, I'm sure you must have some suggestions for for the policymakers. But before that, I want to know, as an entrepreneur, what advice would you give to aspiring business leaders who are looking to make a positive impact on sustainable and innovation factors in India? Also, please share some suggestions for the policymakers to further, uplift the sector.
Sure. I mean, again, I would say like with just running my company for 4 years, I might be, completely underqualified to give an advice to business leaders. But let me, with that, caveat, let me still share a couple of my views.
Sure.
I think number one, we need to start trusting the Indian ecosystem better.
Right.
It be Indian technology players, Indian manufacturers, Indian service providers. We need to start trusting literally our folk more, right? And not be still in that mindset of, this is coming from the US, it must be right. Whereas if it's coming from India, look at it 10 times, right? So I think that is one. Once we start doing that itself, that will move us a lot. Second thing is, we need to start, I think business leaders need to start looking at, let's say, start, accepting the fact that they need to start going knee deep into technology, right? I mean, it's not, we cannot anymore just do a trading or a supply chain kind of a game and, sort it out. We need to start investing in people, which is going to be expensive, investing in labs, investing in, let's say, capability building, and eventually look at problems and try to solve them from a technology side rather than just from a procurement or a supply chain perspective. That is number two. I think the third and the major things you already mentioned before is we need to start sharing that urgency. I mean, and echoing that urgency in everything, in things we write in our company's vision, in our strategies, and the policy, and like everything around it, right? Because it should not be. We don't. I mean, first of all, greenwashing is unethical. That's completely true. But we don't even have time for it. Even if we do that, our generations will not survive, right? It's not a matter of choice. We have to do it now, right? We have a role to play. So that level of, I would say, leadership, encouraging sustainability in a very transparent and honest way is very important, right? Like true leadership. On the policy side, I think a couple of things. I mean, we as policymakers in India can be more bolder, right? I mean, what we have seen is that a lot of policymakers, especially on the government side, tend to be, I would say, again, without finding the right word, more appeasing to, let's say, the higher ups, right? I mean, there should be a little bit more room to allow for challenge, allow for coming up with unconventional policy making. I mean, and right now it's very lopsided. I mean, there's a very, very strong lobby of, let's say, very big industrialists out there, and it's very difficult to kind of strike the right balance. And then there are very hard deputy engineers, executive engineers, and in a number of these let's say government let's say bodies, right? Especially Gujarat has worked with, but at some point their voice is not heard much because they are very down the line, right? I mean, they know much more in that perspective. So there is a bold aspect, right? Opening up, allowing for it. And I think last but not the least, we need to look at what are we really trying to solve with the policy, right? I mean, the policy should be there to solve, let's say, understanding the why of the policy, understanding the objective of the policy is very important. Because we can make anything we want, but then if we are saying that, local development, right, or rural, let's say, the state itself or the region needs to prosper, that needs to stop now. Yeah, fine, then look at that perspective rather than, looking at it from giving incentives for export-oriented industry sector. I'm not denying that it's useful or not, but, focus should be more on understanding that why and helping there as well. So I think these are a few things which I mean, again, with that caveat that I'm, I think, underqualified for it, but still helping and putting out my point.
And from where I am seeing, I don't think you are not at all underqualified. You are I think Umagine is doing great to uplift this sector, and you are doing great, sir. And with this, I would like to thank you for joining us. It was indeed a great chat, and I'm sure that our audience is going to love this conversation. And for our audience, that's all for today's episode of Green Guardians. Till the time we are bringing another inspiring leader like Mr. Gurunath, keep supporting sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you.